Okay, today we're going to talk about section 2.1. This is the preview, so this is the information you need to know before we actually begin this section. So we want you to watch the video and take notes. You have a choice by either writing it into your notebook or completing the outline that's found on Schoology called section 2.1 preview. To begin, we're going to talk about these shapes. So we have these 3 different shapes here, and they're actually called algebra tiles. Now, some of you might have heard those before. You might have even have used them before. But before we can begin solving these equations and simplifying and all that, we need to make sure that we're on the same page. So the long green one, that represents the x or any variable. So it really could be y, it could be z, it could be a, b, c, smiley face. Any of those, that's your variable. The yellow square is a positive 1, and the red square is a negative 1. So we can use these to demonstrate various expressions. So for example, if I had 2 red ones, what expression or term would that be? Well, you have 2 red ones, and they're both negative, so you have 2 negatives. If I wanted to show positive 2, I would use 2 yellow ones. And if I wanted to show 2x, I would do 2 green ones. Okay? So that's just for you. You don't have to write those down unless you want to. Now, let's talk about what a zero pair is. A zero pair, if we look at the word itself, it's a pair, so 2 things, that if it's 0, the value has to be 0. So which 2 of these things, if I put them together, will I get 0? Think about that for a minute. Well, hopefully you came up with a yellow one and a red one together, because if you have positive 1 plus a negative 1, that equals 0. You get 0. You could get fancy if you wanted to. You could do 5 positives and 5 negatives. It doesn't have to necessarily be 2, but in this instance, we're talking about a zero pair. We're talking about 2 things that equal 0. But just remember, you can have more than 2 of each one to equal 0. Okay, so we know we have our x's, we have our positive ones, and our negative ones. And if I put them together, they're zero pair. So I want to set up, or I want to create a expression, a visual representation for 2x plus 1. So if I think about that, this says 2x. So exactly like it says, you need 2 x's. So you're going to come over and you're going to have 2 x's. And in your notes, if you are taking notes, you should write 2x plus 1, that expression down, and then draw these. If you have the scaffolded notes, you could just go ahead and draw them. And then plus 1. Now, unless you have colored pencils or markers or whatever, you're not going to color these. So we have to be able to decipher between the yellow and the red one, just so we're all on the same page. If you have a red one, you shade that one in. So if we ever have a red one, we will shade this. So when I want to set it up, I have 2x plus 1. That's your answer. Right there, that's 2x plus 1. Okay, let's try this one. Let's set up 4x plus 7 equals 3. Uh-oh. Now we're going to equal something. So let's go ahead and set it up. We have 4x's, so 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to squeeze that there. and then plus 7. So I'm going to have 7 yellows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, equals 3. How am I going to show that? Well, I'm just going to put equals, and then I'm going to put 3 more positive squares. So this entire thing right here, if you gave that to me or I gave it to you, we would both know that it was 4x plus 7 equals 3. All right, let's try this one. 1. So we're going to do, I like to think of it as, the equal sign's like a wall. So I do the left side first, and then I do the right side. So I have positive 1, so I'm going to do a 1. And then plus 3 x's. So 1, 2, 3. Now notice that my numbers, my yellow is first, my unit square, and my x's, my variables, come second. It's okay either way. I just like to keep them together to be organized. Now I have to show -4, so instead of positives, I'm going to do negatives. And when you're drawing this, remember to show a negative, you need to shade it in to show that it's red and it's negative. So either by using a line or an equal sign, that's your answer. Okay, now let's look at this one. This is a little different. So we have 3 x's, not a big deal. 1, 2, 3. But now I have -2. Well, if I add positive 2, that's going to be 3x plus 2. If you can remember that this is an important rule for algebra in general, the sign always goes with the number. So this is 3x. There's no sign in it, so it's positive. This is -2, and this is positive 6. So this minus sign is the same thing as if you remember when you added or subtracted integers, you added the opposite. So you had 3x minus 2, and your teacher would say that's the same thing as adding an opposite, or maybe you heard keep, change, change. So if you look, you're adding -2. It's the exact same thing. So we're going to add -2. So what you want to remember for algebra is that the sign goes with the number, and then that equals positive 6. So what you need to know for this particular example is that a -2 minus 2 is the same thing as adding a -2. That's the big idea I want you to know. All right, so now I want you to pause the video and I want you to set this up.